But with the atom bomb, it suddenly you wanted physics secrets. And so the result of that was they went into the existing physics papers that had been published and they started redacting them, removing stuff which they considered to be secrets about the atom bomb. And after that, they then took control of the science papers and imposed upon what was allowed to be published in academia.
And good afternoon, everyone. As always, trying to bring you the brilliant minds. You're going to love this conversation. Roger Anderton here is going to be speaking at Alternative View Conference hosted, and this will be in the UK, Sunday, May 4th in Glastonbury. We wanted to talk about Einstein tonight, and everybody has, E equals MC squared, and he almost has the, you're supposed to look at this person, Einstein, like walking on water, a religious figure at points, but so many things are wrong with what we consider relativity and just science and physics in itself, the way we can debate things, not debate things. And before, we press live here, Roger was talking about 1919, and we're going to cover a gamut of what light is of, and now with the Santilli telescopes, finding light negative index refraction entities. I personally feel energy is information and information is energy, but when we're looking at matter and antimatter, that equation doesn't really wrap in, and then we got the photon and the antiphoton, and it just takes. It sounds very scientific and analytical right now, but once you see how this overlays with what we're seeing on magnetic fields with the sun, how scientists have been bent, morphed, and controlled even since, like I say, 1919, 1920 era, you're going to get the full picture of, wow, this absolutely fits into a tight glove here. And at the end of the talk, I think you're going to be as amazed as I was of the information Roger sent me. He said, take a look at this. You're going to, so, this really does open a different chapter of control in the sciences. Has been for 100 years plus. And where does it go from here is more the question, because our world's changing so much at this very moment. So even more tight control comes over what we can say across the internet. So Roger, I appreciate you joining me. I'm going to say the floor is yours. I don't know where you really want to start, but as we were speaking before, I want to bring it back to the regular person here. How does it matter for the rest of science or daily life of all of the rest of us on Earth if Einstein's relativity is actually incorrect or hypotheses and theories are incorrect? Like, how does that guide us here for the average person that's looking? And that's more like the 60,000 foot view. But then when we bring it down into, can we find defined parts of that are incorrect? And again, it's science. So, it might not ever be defined because it is science. We should always debate it. So there, I'm done speaking in the intro. Welcome, everybody. And Roger, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, David, for the introduction. So I'm from a group is called John Chappell Natural Philosophy Society. And natural philosophy is sort of like the old name for science stroke physics. And we've been going for quite some time under the earlier name of Natural Philosophy Alliance.
What if I told you that groundbreaking studies have uncovered a therapy so powerful it's helping people achieve what was once thought impossible? Imagine having the energy of someone half your age, the skin of somebody 20 years younger. That's what thousands are experiencing with red light therapy. Whether you're battling chronic fatigue, stubborn weight gain, joint pain, autoimmune flare-ups, just minutes a day with clinical grade red light, it works by recharging your cell's mitochondria, like fueling billions of tiny batteries in your body. This is especially powerful for immune cells, which need massive energy to function at their best. That's why countless studies show red light therapy's incredible benefits. Not all devices are created equal. You need medical grade power and all 9 healing wavelengths, ensuring maximum power deliverability for deep cellular healing with no harmful EMF. Want to learn more? Go to myredlight.com, use the coupon code ADAPT2030 to get 10% off your purchase. One device serves the whole family and pays for itself in months. Don't settle for fatigue, pain, and premature aging. Reclaim your vitality with Red Life.
And many of us, we were a group that is an open science discussion group and mainly talk about physics. And many of us in this group believe that Einstein's relativity is wrong, and we've believed it for quite a long time. But it's not a point of view which the mainstream academia allows. And so we wanted to try to get it more publicity. And so a few years ago, we created this film, Einstein's Wrong. And it was basically the idea of this eccentric family going around discussing Einstein's relativity. The idea was to show this film at film festivals, but the film festivals wouldn't allow it to be shown. You could say, well, why didn't they let it be shown? And they didn't. Well, as far as I know, they didn't give a reason for it. They just blocked it from being shown at these film festivals. And I think it's because Einstein has got such a large, big fan base that they block anything. So if you're going to show a film which says Einstein is wrong, they don't like that, and they just protest and stop that sort of film being shown. And so our group is trying to bring this out to the public more, that actually there's an alternative point of view to the mainstream, which is promoting Einstein's relativity. And that alternative point of view is that Einstein's relativity is wrong. And that point of view has been going on for a very long time. It's as soon as Einstein became famous in 1919, people were saying Einstein's relativity is wrong. But then comes along the Second World War, and after the Second World War, it seemed to be that academia was made to be just people who were saying that they agreed with Einstein's relativity, and people who were not, who were opposed to Einstein's relativity, were sort of like slowly phased out of academia. So academia is just mainly people who are saying that Einstein's relativity is right, and the point of view that Einstein's relativity is wrong is sort of being suppressed. And this has not been allowed to get out to the public in a bigger publicity. All the publicity, as you see on these physics programs, is how wonderful Einstein's relativity is, with the warping of space-time and black holes and all these other very exotic ideas. And it's sort of like they don't give the contrasting point of view that there are people saying it's wrong. And we have been sort of like suppressed. We've not been allowed to get this message out to the public. So that was the point of my conference, was to bring this out to the public, to let them know that there are dissidents that are saying it's wrong.
Could I stop you just for a second here and ask a follow-up question to that?
Okay.
Like, when you were talking about in 1919 that the physics started to be hidden at that point, especially when we got into the war, and then they backtracked and they started to pull published journals out of libraries. You called it the looting of published journals, looting of the libraries here in America. So can you touch on that just for a second? I thought that was one of the most interesting points on already how 100 years ago they were starting to, I mean, beyond Tesla in the late 1800s, 1890s, but up to that point, how they were really starting to control what could be of scene that was published prior to. So can you walk us through that for a minute?
So I've researched this, and what happened was you had the atom bomb development in the Second World War via the thing called the Manhattan Project. And what many people are probably not aware of is that science papers, physics papers basically became military secret. Before that, physics was an open discussion thing, and it didn't seem to have much military significance. But with the atom bomb, it suddenly, you wanted physics secrets. And so the result of that was they went into the existing physics papers that had been published, and they started redacting them, removing stuff which they considered to be secrets about the atom bomb. And after that, they then took control of the science papers and imposed upon what was allowed to be published in academia. And so that's how they managed to keep the secrets up. And so with the case of Einstein, he came out with his theories and his big publicity in 1919 about how light was bent. There was people saying he was wrong. But after World War II, that sort of voice was slowly phased out from academia, and it just left people who were praising the genius of Einstein's relativity. And
What
so
was your
they
sunset?
suppressed.
What was your sunset quote of that one?
I found that this process of doing that is called soft sunset. And I think it was Eric Weinstein who talked about that what happens in academia, point of views they don't like, they slowly phase it out. The people who've got the point of view which they don't like slowly get phased out of academia, and they don't get replaced by anybody with that same sort of point of view. So they slowly phased out people who were dissenting against Einstein's relativity. There were examples I think it was the 1970s, by physicists such as Herbert Dingle, who was dissenting against it, and by another one, Louis Eason. But that slowly, that sort of dissent was phased out. So they just leave people who are saying how wonderful Einstein's relativity is. And you see that in the science programs with people like Neil deGrasse Tyson saying how wonderful Einstein's relativity is, with black holes, warp space time, and so forth. It's all very attractive, but they don't give a dissenting voice. And so in our group, we have a dissenting voice. Many of us don't believe the propaganda that is promoted about how wonderful Einstein's relativity is.
And that's true science, where you're allowed to debate or
Yeah,
re-debate or
yeah,
re-experiment or whatever it is. It's never settled. See, that's the whole thing we've gotten into today. And you know what's so interesting saying that is it's a copy paste 2.0 right now in the whole climate arena. Like anybody who dissents, you're out, your funding's gone,
yeah,
your tenure's
yeah,
removed, and it's
yeah.
only yes people that are in there right now. It's so interesting how history has repeated itself. You know, as I was trying to dive through, there were a few quotes here that I pulled out that said, well, they want to tell you how it should work, but they never show you how it truly works. And
Yeah.
again, that comes back in for the debate. Well, if you can't explain it and I'm just supposed to take it at face value that it works this way, should I not be allowed to experiment, re-experiment, develop new equipment to experiment, to prove or disprove what that is supposed to be? But again, most of this, what you were quoting there of the black holes and time space and bending space,
Yeah,
they show you how, but they just say, take our word for it. This is how it works, and this should how it works.
yeah,
And when people actually find bits of that disprove it, or 30 different anomalies within that, then suddenly these are the same people that are no longer allowed to get into the peer-reviewed published process. Now, why is that? So for me, I'm coming at it as the exact same copy paste 2.0. I don't care if it's from the climate debate or whether it's from this relativity debate, but what is it that they're not allowing is that they don't want that in the discourse. They want to remove all talk of it or any possibilities of there being something else. Like this is running parallel here. So why is it in two different, you wouldn't say they're discoupled sciences, but parallel sciences? Why are we, this is the exact same thing that's how, what are they hiding from us that can disprove completely that edge of things that would be so terrifying and so dangerous that it might decouple the entire world economy or something? I mean, why is this being suppressed? And you can see it clearly now in so many different ways, shapes, and forms. I'm trying to find answers myself. I'm truly asking the question, why?
It's military secrets that the military do have control over science via the sort of like hidden backdoor sort of methods, that they're ultimately in control over what is allowed to be published in science journals, and they're also in control over what experiments can be done. Because if you want to do an experiment, you've got to apply for that from Research Council, and that's ultimately controlled by military. So it's military secrets, basically. As I said, before you go back before World War II, there wasn't this sort of military secret thing imposed upon physics and science. And from my point of view, I just tie it into the UFO cover up. So UFOs have been covered up, and they want to keep secret about what craft they've got flying around, which is more advanced than aircraft secrets, and then so it's the physics side of the UFO cover up.
Like how many free energy devices could be developed from that tech alone, and how much of it's reversed into our own re-engineered vehicles using some of the same tech that, again, it would set the world free. Now we're talking about, when I say not even national security, global security, because if these inventions were to come out wild style and everybody could get like the decoupling where we no longer need energy, we no longer need roads, everything's electric gravitics, we're all moving through weightless. Your energy is on demand here from a little
Yeah,
box no bigger than a bread box for your house. You never need
yeah,
to pay for anything ever again on the energy realms, ever again.
yeah.
Like, think about the
But
cost of life.
that was the problem that Tesla had. But he was going to offer free energy, and sort of his financial backer, JP Morgan, didn't want it because he didn't know how to tax it, he wanted something which you could charge the customer, make them pay for. So if you give it away free, then you're not, as a financier, you're not making money. So it's all tied into that. Free energy is not what the billionaires want.
I would say not. Now, walk me
Yeah,
through this for a second. I get it. It spins my head a little bit to think about the differences of light and the differences in light. So,
yeah,
when you redirected me a couple things to do some research on, like the matter antimatter, the minus E, they got that wrong as well in the equations,
yeah,
and then also with light, if you're talking about photons and antiphotons, that comes in, and it seems like there's a correlation, that's a disconnect there as well. But with a
yeah,
Centilli telescope, when you're getting these convex rays coming in and you're able to actually view light negative index refraction beings inside there. So like these three things are all tying in together. And it seems like there's an invisible layer of our world that's not allowed to be experimented on with the current, let's say, delicate machinery that we would use you're only allowed to experiment with a certain type of light, and you're not allowed to, and they try to force you down the same road to experiment on other bendable light, let's say, sources, but you have to use the same. So you're not going to get, and they're doing it on purpose, in my opinion. So that's what I got out of doing this research here, is there is a whole nother layer that's available for research, but we are not even allowed to touch our toe into that pool.
hmm I guess that it's being covered up because there's ordinary light, and there's also this dual light, which Professor Santilli has identified, and so your eyes aren't able to focus this other sort of light. Your eyes set up to focus ordinary light, and you have to have a thing like Santilli telescope to be able to focus this dual light. So basically, we've been have shut into only viewing ordinary light and not seeing this other type of light. And that means these objects which are emitting this other type of light are invisible to us because our eyes don't focus them. So it's basically uh, invisible aliens, unless you've got a Santilli telescope to actually uh, show them. I speculate maybe it's a similar sort of thing with ghosts. Maybe when people see things out the corner of their eye, a sort of like weird shadow going by, and they think, "What's that?" But when they try focusing on it, it disappears. And maybe that's something which is you can't focus upon because it's not emitting ordinary light. So I speculate that there's all of this sort of things going on out there. There's a great deal of the world we're not seeing because we've been tied into seeing things from ordinary light. And it's kind of like these objects which emit light, uh, this dual light. And so when you take images of the night sky with the Santilli uh, telescope, suddenly you're seeing all these structures in the sky, which are basically, I think, just alien intelligences. There's a great deal of stuff out there, and our ordinary lives are not actually seeing it.
Now, who does that
It's,
benefit for
it's
iso dual light not being able to be experimented on, delved into, worked on, researched on, except probably the top secret Skunk Works or somewhere like this, Raytheon, these sort of companies at the top levels that would be diving into this sort of research. So who does that benefit by just the regular physics community not being able to go further into this research?
my way of looking at things has been to do a paper search. through science papers and so forth. So there's three areas. There's sort of like the white, and there's the grey, and there's the black ops. And so white academia, everything's open. You can read about it, and I've gone through that and seen the papers that have been removed from the white area, and then there's the black ops, and that's I have no idea what the black ops people are doing. And then there's the grey ops, which is half white and half black. And I've been going to lots of physics conferences, and they seem to be talking about things which is halfway between what they're allowed to openly talk about and what they're not allowed to talk about when you talk to these physicists. So you've got the secret physics. And so whatever they do in the secret physics, I have no idea. I'm sort of like white ops with a little bit of grey.
Yeah, because they're programming us currently, at least not follow my train of thought here. So they're pushing out there that we're coming to the end of the world. And this has been a gradual thing that has gotten to the snowball effect now of where coming to, the Charles Hapgood crustal displacement theories back out there again. I mean, they're running hard. There's an enormous amount of articles probably in the last year that, this thing disappeared with the Adam and Eve story that was supposedly declassified from the CIA, where Einstein was actually a co-author with Charles Hapgood. This thing disappeared, went underground for years and years, and then suddenly it just pops back up like a mole in the middle of your field, and then, hey, I'm back again. And then it got some legs. It was allowed to run through social media, and then they tried to quote unquote silence that and remove it, which made people even more interested. So then it kind of went out further afield, and now not only that, but micronova from the sun, this grand solar minimum inbound, which is a thing, magnetic field shift in the sun that's causing disruptions in our cloud cells and jet streams, decreasing crop yields globally. That's a real thing ongoing. They're talking about the complete restructuring of the entire economy and resetting everything back from zero again to whatever form that new one takes. It only works if relativity works with time space. Like anywhere else, that whole crustal displacement thing's a no-go. So why is it they force this sort of pseudoscience on us, and then they're taking us down the trajectory of all this predictive programming again and again and again and again? I'm wondering if you're seeing some of this in these conferences you're going to, like the seeds are being placed in there for this all-encompassing message of the world's ending, it's restructuring, it's this or that, there's going to be depopulation, it's going to, and this is the consistent messaging from this year forward. Now, how does this all fit into the physics realm and these hidden sciences and projects that you just spoke of?
Haven't been properly told about science and physics. So if they can tell you their version of science and physics, then they've got a way of controlling you. So ordinary people are just out of the equation. It's only the people, the elite, that are knowing a bit more of what's going on.
I was just wondering if that would be a way to destroy the old tech, like burn it through the battlefield scene here on the planet for a couple years, and then bring out all this new technology, which you're referring to, all these, super, then we're looking at leading edge plasma fields on planes that are far above what the, these blackbirds and all these types of things are. But imagine, with the experiments they're just doing at CERN, which I've seen them bending plasma around through magnetic fields. I mean, that is something in itself. I mean, what are they going to come out with after all this? Because I would look at it as the same way. If you got all this things that taxpayers been paying for forever, supposedly state of the art, and then you just ruin it all, we have to come up with a whole new generation of the next, whatever it is, just fill in your blank there on that. Technology, innovation, weaponry, it doesn't matter. Food sources, transportation, there's like a million. Shipping, there could be. In your opinion, like how much are they really going to jump in terms of, are we going to come out with like weightless craft like they were experimenting with after World War II and Dr. Brown and these people in the electrogravitics space? Or are we just going to go to something that's slightly better? Or are we really going to jump off into that's old stuff? Even anything that you've seen up to this point that you think is like, wow, in tech is going to be minimal comparatively to what we could jump to in the next world here.
To me, the world just seems to be full of people that naturally want to fight and end up in going to wars. And so we have periods of peace where we build up our weapons, and the next minute we have a war. And it seems to be that's how we progress. And sort of like most people are well, the people in charge are sort of like hypocrites. You prepare for war all the time, and eventually a war breaks out, and then technology has increased. And the idea is to have your technology and science be better than the person you're fighting. If you get in patents, that is military control as well. Is they only allow certain patents to go through. And so that's blocked a lot of free energy patents. It's sort of anything with a military significance, and then they don't want those sort of patents to go out in the general public. When I started, I was not on the internet, and I was researching through libraries and seeing what papers had been removed from the physics journals to give an idea of what's being covered up. And that's I think the situation's got worse now that things are getting disappearing because on the internet everything used to be on there, all my links, and then suddenly the links start disappearing, and you're supposed to be able to look at it on a thing called Wayback Machine, and it's even disappeared from there now. So things are disappearing from the internet, and so things that disappear from uh, libraries. You get my place is the British Library. You go try to get things from there, and things get disappear from that. One of the problems they had flooding decades ago, and that's an excuse for a lot of things disappearing. So information disappears, and it was supposed to be years ago when I started using the internet. Internet will be able to keep information safe, but it seemed like no, it goes from there as well.
And it is disappearing. We need synthetic DNA to
Yeah,
wrap that in a crystalline structure and
yeah,
quartz crystal and hold that on so and info never disappears. But so walk me through it. So you mentioned something interesting for me. It goes from white to gray to black. So if I was going to do some research on my own, like where would I find how would I find that the information had been removed from libraries? Okay, so you're
yeah,
at the British Library Museum Library,
yeah.
one in the same museums or libraries, these types of things. But like if I was going to search in American libraries over here, how would I know what was there prior to what had been
Yeah.
removed?
There was a book called Future Science, and it was giving the references. It was publishing articles, and it was giving the references of the earlier articles that had gone by. And I think the book was published in the 1960s, so forth. And when you try to look at those references, those earlier papers, they've disappeared. What you do is you get a book, see what reference, if it's a good book, it give you references where the information is coming from. You go to those references, see whether they disappeared, and if you get those papers, you then look at those references from those papers and see if they've disappeared. And eventually, you go back, and say, "Oh, things are disappearing." They sort of redact it. They remove the papers. But that was when physics was, as I said, an open discussion forum before the Manhattan Project, and after that was what was happening. They were publishing things, and then those things were getting redacted. But after the Manhattan Project, they won't even let those papers get published in science journals, in respective science journals. So it's been uh, they've got it pretty much covered as to how they can block things. One of the things I found out was Boscovich, a priest in the 18th century, and he was saying a lot of many of the things that Einstein was saying. And when I've talked to people, a person I talked to, Dr. James Watson, not the famous James Watson, but his point of view was that was one of the areas which they weren't able to redact. Boscovich at the time, the 18th century, was a really famous person, so they weren't able to remove that because the narrative they generally want to give is all the ideas that Einstein came up with is from 1905 onwards, and they don't want to talk about the ideas of being earlier. So they were trying to remove everything they could to keep that sort of narrative about Einstein that he wasn't working from earlier information. But sometimes you get a famous person like Boscovich, and you can't really wipe him completely out the record. You just try to persuade people not to pay attention to it.
Incredibly
Yeah,
interesting. And
okay.
we only delved into just like a fraction of truly what there could be to talk about. And Again,
Yeah.
Roger Anderton going to be at Alternative View in Glastonbury Sunday, May 4th. And your talk, General Relativity Revisited, Einstein's Wrong. So anyway, I appreciate your time. I am going to leave the comment box below open. So please leave some ideas, thoughts, and anything I'll pass over to Roger through email. And anyway, bye
Okay.
for now.